Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, convincing a population of individuals to behave badly. And what does it take for that type of individual to turn a whole population into individuals behaving badly? I'm Antoinette Naomi, an anthropologist and behavioral scientist. And today I want to talk to you about the power of persuasion and the power of groupthink, and how individuals can be taken into a sphere of influence. Groupthink, which was a term coined in 1972 by Irving L. Yanis, it is really well defined by Investopedia. Groupthink is a phenomenon that occurs when a group reaches a consensus without critical thinking or evaluation of the consequences or alternatives. Groupthink is based on a common desire not to upset the balance of a group of people. They're following the group's ideology and they're following the group's mindset. In the 1950s, there was a researcher named Solomon Asch who conducted a series of experiments. And in those experiments, they depicted human behavior and how humans have a tendency, when they're under pressure, they have a tendency to acquiesce and to follow the dominant way of thinking without using ration while ignoring judgment. He conducted a series of experiments that involved Confederates and subjects, and those Confederates were the ones that actually were in on the process being rigged, but the subjects were being tested for their ability to conform.
But an experiment is not a public opinion poll. It examines behavior under the pressure of social forces, as the experiment of Solomon Asch reveals.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines. As you can see here, I have a number of cards, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the three lines on the right is equal to it in length.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the fifth person with the white t-shirt. The others are Confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials. The experiment begins uneventfully as subjects give their judgments.
Two. 3. 3.
But on the third trial, something happens.
2. 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
1.
Asch found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
1.
They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me.
1.
This subject's yielding is based on a distortion of his judgment. He genuinely believes that the group is correct.
1. 1. 2. 1. 2. 2.
I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves?
2.
In this case, the subject knows he is right, but goes along to avoid the discomfort of disagreeing with the group. Here, the distortion is at the level of his response.
2.
In the previous experiment, the naive subject stood alone against the group. In this variation, Asch gave the naive subject a partner, here seated in the third position, who also gives the correct response.
1. 2. 2.
With a partner, yielding drops to only 5% of the critical trials compared to 37% without a partner. Although subjects report warmth and good feeling toward the partner, they typically deny that he played a role in their own independence. The partnership variation shows that much of the power of the group came not merely from its numbers, but from the unanimity of its opposition. When that unanimity is punctured, the group's power is greatly reduced. Sometimes we go along with the group because what they say convinces us they are right. This is called informational conformity. But sometimes we conform because we are apprehensive that the group will disapprove if we are deviant. This is called normative conformity. The strength of the normative factor is shown in another variation carried out by Asch. In this variation, the subject is told that because he had arrived late, he would have to write his answers. Subjects in this private response experiment are exposed to the same amount of misleading information as other subjects, but they are immune from any possible criticism by the group.
1.
1.
1.
And this enormously reduces the pressure to conform. Conformity drops by 2/3. Asch's experiment is a classic. It reveals how people will deny what they see and submit to group pressure. It allows us not only to observe conformity, but to study the conditions that increase or reduce its occurrence.
You can see in that video, even though we can think about individuals being introduced to a group for the first time. So the subject was in a group with individuals that they didn't know. However, this situation involved simply lines. So they didn't really have a stake in the game other than just wanting to please, other than just wanting to in no way make waves, especially in an environment that's new. If you can even look at your own personal behavior, the natural tendency, depending on which culture you're in, the natural tendency is to want to please, to want to show up, to want to present your best self. If you're thinking about a relationship, if we're on a first date, or even if we're being interviewed for the first time, the first thing that we want to do is we want to please, we want to fit in. And so with that video, the most influential part of it was how they manifested the behavior of conformity. That video was men. Sullivan Asch's experiments in this video were conducted on men. There have been several experiments conducted over the ages. However, there was one study that I pulled showing the behavior of males and females. So there was an all-female group, an all-male group, and then a mixed group. And the conclusion was that the study conducted attempted to measure whether sex played a significant role in conformity. And the results show that it does indeed. Males within a mixed group showed a tendency to conform more than males in an all-female or an all-male group. With that said, more in-depth research would have to take place to more definitively determine whether sex plays a role or not. So basically, there was no significant difference between male conformity within all female or female groups. The results showed that there was a tendency for the male to perform differently when they were in a mixed group setting, specifically with females. In that setting, the males tended to conform more readily. So during the Sullivan Asch experiment, when they were asked after, like the subjects, when they were asked why they chose to conform, they said even though they didn't really believe their answers, they chose to conform for two reasons: the fear of being ridiculed or the fear of being seen as peculiar. And so that segues into another idea, the behavior of groupthink. Without the individual having a solid sense of a no, like a solid sense of drawing boundaries with the groups that they are a part of. This happens in so many different areas with ethnic distinctions. It happens with nations. It happens with individuals that claim their rightness based on hierarchical structures that have been formed from groupthink, formed from the concept of habitus. And when I talk about habitus, coined by sociologist Pierre Bourdieu. So Pierre Bourdieu's concept of habitus expressed how individuals self-regulate their own behaviors to fit social expectations. Based on this concept of habitus, it's considered to be largely unconscious, and it is simplified as saying a feel for the game. meaning what's really happening in this situation, what's really happening in my surroundings, what's really happening in my family, what's really happening in my social circle, what's really happening in my business or in my corporation, what's really happening in my group, whether it be ethnic groups or quote unquote racial groups, what's happening in my group where I am a member, and how do I continue to fit in, to follow their behavior. These groups can look like political groups, right, left, in between. It can look like these groups. What is my behavior? What is the behavior in order for me to fit in? It allows us to see that groupthink can take place in any culture, in any situation. The most important part of this is, how does the individual allow themselves to be fortified and strong in their own values level without feeling like they have to please, without feeling like they have to go with the consensus, even if it's somebody that they respect and admire, even if it's somebody that we value, even if it's somebody that we have looked over and said, wow, I want to be like them. Even if it's somebody that appears to have it all together, if they are following a format or a behavior or a sense of values that are outside of healthy, even if it's science, and even though as a social scientist, I can understand how it could be easy from my vantage point to follow the consensus, scientific consensus, in order to fit in order to feel like I belong, in order to feel like I'm included, especially in order to be revered by my colleagues. We have had so many times throughout history, especially in the late 1800s, throughout the start of the 1900s, into the mid 1900s, some extreme cases of groupthink and group conformity can be seen from Nazi Germany, Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, convincing a population of individuals to behave badly. And what does it take for that type of individual to turn a whole population into individuals behaving badly? That era, that time of our existence was wrought with so much violence, so much othering, so many individuals having this ideology that they were better than, so much around the topic of nationalization, so much about nationalism. Nationalism is this concept of owning their territory, defending their territory, believing that their position is right. There has been a history of negativity, battles fought against countries, against populations. The villains of our history, we can look back to Mussolini. To Hitler.
Wenn es dem internationalen Finanzjudentum in und außerhalb Europas gelingen sollte, die Völker noch einmal in einen Weltkrieg zu stürzen, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht die Bolschewisierung der Erde und damit der Sieg des Judentums sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
To Stalin.
Идет нас от победы к победам, тому, кто завоевал нашу бесконечную любовь и преданность великому родному Сталину.
We believed we were constructing a new world, a new mankind.
But millions paid the price for this economic miracle. Hundreds of thousands slaughtered, hundreds of thousands sent to the Gulag. Over a quarter of a century in power, he perfected the art of rule by terror, forced labor, mass starvation, assassination. These were his political tools. 20 million Soviet citizens were killed by Joseph Stalin's brutal regime.
None of those individuals would ever have been able to take power if the population hadn't gone rogue, if there wasn't something going on with the population that made them choose that negative outpicturing of what was really going on in their hearts and minds. And so we can say, well, no, that's false. It's not us. It's them. They are the villains. But what does it take for a villain to convince an entire population, thousands of individuals, millions of individuals, to behave badly? Haile Selassie went in front of the League of Nations.
Ladies and gentlemen, the second speaker on the list is His Majesty Negus Haile Selassie. I call upon the first delegate of Ethiopia.
Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le... እኔ ቀዳማዊ ኃይለ ሥላሴ የኢትዮጵያ ንጉሠ ነገሥት የዛሬ 8 ወር 50 መንግስታት የዓለምን መንግስታት ሕግ የተላለፈ የአጥቂነት ጦርነት መደረጉን ምክንያቱም ወታደሮቹ ቦምቡ በወደቀ ጊዜ ጋዙን ነፋስ እስኪወስደው ድረስ መበታተኑን ስላወቁበት ነው። ዘራቸውንም ለማጥፋት አደጋ እየጣለ ወጋቸው።
His people had been gassed when groups of individuals, fascists, decided that they needed to have their own territory and that they were going to invade his land. And they chose to gas and do ungodly things to a group of individuals that were just trying to lead their lives. That same thing happened in Ukraine.
Can you imagine this morning, 2 cruise missiles hit this Freedom Square, dozens of killed ones. This is the price of freedom. We're fighting just for our land and for our freedom, despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked. Nobody is going to enter and intervene with our freedom and country. And believe you me, every square of today, no matter what it's called, it's going to be called, as today, Freedom Square.
This is our global history where negativity can come up to haunt us by following the groupthink. We know that we have the propensity to be a part of groupthink, the propensity as humans to be lured into negativity, lured into battle, lured into chaos, lured into hostility, simply by the conviction of they don't belong. They don't belong here. Send them back to where they came from. They need to go away. Their behavior can otherwise be deemed as inhumane, but it is almost as if it's a suspension of rational and valued judgment for the sake of conforming to the group. When groupthink and group conformity is at its heightened expression, it could be as nominal as a comma, but it could grow and be as gruesome as concentration camps and as inhumane in Nazi Germany, where the Jews were pulled from their homes and taken to these camps, all from the case of subjective consensus. Eugenics was used in different parts of Western culture. They pushed sterilization. They pushed the annihilation of the debilitating race or the debilitating deformity in human existence. All of this created a pattern of behavior that influenced negativity and influenced hostility and influenced divisions and segregation and racism. What does the lure of a good life mean? Does it mean that we villainize others? Does it mean that we turn others into animals because they are different than us? What does it mean? There once was a boy named Otebinga. He was sold and became the property of an anthropologist. Otebinga was a pygmy from the Congo Free State, taken to the Americas to be placed on display in these human zoos. They were in parts of Europe and they were also in the United States, inhabited different cultures.
It was presented as science, not as a circus act, because these were men of science who were doing this.
Ota Benga went on display in the Monkey House on Saturday, September the 8th, 1906.
Ota Benga was one case study of a pygmy pulled from his native land and taken to the United States and put on display, where he was the subject of ridicule and harassment and viewed as an animal, as a subhuman creature. They jeered at him, they chased him, they laughed at him, they picked on him. This was group conformity because they believed what they were told. Their behavior followed consensus, even though it was wrong. And so many others like those charismatic men throughout our history have come and they will come again. But the only thing that is necessary is how do we start being individual thinkers, start being thinkers where we are no longer lured by groupthink, no longer lured by the need to belong, the need to fit in, the need to be included, the need to in no way be harassed or make waves or be jeered at or yelled at because we are in no way following the conventional way of behaving. With the pressures of modern societies like paying bills, getting the comforts of life, the American dream, the European dream, the earthly dream, for those that want the Western civilization dream, to have a home, to have a husband or a wife, or to have a significant other, to have 2.5 children and a dog, to have the best things in life. Those individuals that want to live life just comfortably, to have a good life. There's so many things that can make that into an impossibility, like a hike in pricing for gas or mobility and for just living on earth. And of course, that could turn an individual into somebody that's angry. But what if it really means, how do we become individual thinkers so that we no longer say, just because I'm noticing that there are increases, that I want to have a bigger home, that I want to have a bigger bank account, that I want to have more food on my table, that I want to have X, Y, and Z, that in no way means I need to invade a population of individuals and exterminate them. How can we become individually strong in character that says no matter what the pressure that's placed on us, the values, the character is strong? But the biggest part of it is, one of the biggest takeaways is for you to become more intentional about emphasizing how do I, regardless of my ethnic group, regardless of my gender, regardless of my corporate situation or structure, regardless of my family, political affiliation, how do I allow myself to be fortified in my own values and be able to articulate what is right without right fighting? Because there could be a stance that says, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? But how about, do you want to be in alignment with your ethics, or do you want to default to groupthink or group conformity or the need to fit in, or the risk of losing friends, the risk of losing family members, the risk of losing partners because of the need to conform? This type of discussion, it deserves a lot more discourse, a lot more investigation, a lot more in-depth conversations about the topic of how do we just be good to each other? How do we be good to one another, good to ourselves and good to one another? Yes, being good to ourselves is definitely having a full bank account, definitely having all of the accoutrements that we want out of life. And then it's also being good to one another, knowing that we are on earth and we're sharing oxygen, we're sharing earth with everybody else. And this means we have to change our own way of thinking about our own lives and say, how do I be a person that's led with values that are of integrity, a person that's led with values that have character and goodness and goodness. And so thank you for giving your valuable time, for taking the moments out of your day, out of your night to watch this video. I'm grateful. And so wherever you are in the world, I wish you so much joy, so much peace, and so much happiness. And until the next time, be good to yourself and also be good to one another. Peace and blessings.